Welcome to the Less Stressed Lawyer Show.
Hello and welcome back to the Less Stressed Lawyer Show with Olivia Vizachero. Olivia is the former attorney turned life and business coach for lawyers. She helps ambitious attorneys stop overthinking, set boundaries, and take bold action so they can build a practice and the life they actually love. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about why lawyers feel mentally drained all the time and how to get their energy back. Miss Olivia, welcome.
So good to see you, Evan.
Good to see you too, Olivia. So a lot of lawyers feel mentally drained even when they're not working extreme hours. What is behind all that?
So part of this comes from what we're actually defining as work. So I remember years ago, a friend of mine asked me, I was feeling a little run down myself, and she asked me how much I was working. And I gave her the hours total. And it wasn't, in my opinion, extreme, even though it was higher than 40 hours a week, as a lot of attorneys often experience. And then she asked me this really insightful question, which was, okay, but outside of that, like, how often are you thinking about work, or how much time are you spending thinking about work? And I was like, oh my goodness, like the number is way higher. I think I added at least 30 hours onto the number I had originally given her. And she was like, hey, that counts as work too.
Yep.
And I was like, what? What do you mean? Like, I see this a lot, especially with women. If they're not physically like typing in Microsoft Word, they don't consider it work.
Yeah.
So if you add that into your total number of working hours, the number of hours that you're thinking about work, that you're thinking about your clients, the stuff that you have to do, your brain's not getting a break from working through all of that stuff. So if you feel like your hours aren't that extreme, but then your hours almost double when you factor in the time that you're thinking about it, you're working more than you realize, and you want to count that and factor it in. The other thing that I see come into play here is that we have this expectation of what our brains should do when we're not working. And I hear this come up for people all the time when they tell me, I just can't seem to shut my brain off.
Right.
And I used to, when I was, earlier in my coaching journey with my clients, I used to sort of pursue or try and excavate what would it look like to turn your brain off. And then over the years, I just started questioning it. And I'm like, wait, do I ever turn my brain off? Like, if I don't think about work, what do I have to do in order to not think about work? And I need a distraction. I need to actively be doing something else in order to get my brain to shift into a different mode. So I've really gotten away from even buying into the concept that we can shut our brains off. I don't know where we picked that up, who told us that, but we literally don't have an off button. Like, our brains are even working when we're sleeping because we can dream. But aside from sleeping, your brain's going to be thinking about something. So you get to decide what it is that it thinks about. If left to its own devices, it's probably going to focus on the things that it thinks of as most important or most urgent. For a lot of people, that's going to be topics that relate to work. But if you force yourself to, go for a walk and listen to a podcast, or call a friend, or schedule an activity on a Friday evening with your family or your partner or friends, and you distract yourself, it will take your mind off of work, and then you'll break the cycle, and then it's easier to continue thinking about other things once you've made that shift.
What tends to drain someone's mental energy during the day, even if it's not obvious in that moment? Is it a little bit what you said, or is there some other things that you've seen as well?
Part of it is that they just aren't focused on something in place of work, so their brain just naturally goes there. But a huge mental drain is worry and trying to control things that are outside of your control. So, not to nerd out here, but putting my lawyer hat back on, or at least channeling my torts professor from law school, or at least challenging one of my professors from law school. There's the concept of ripeness and mootness, right? That comes from constitutional law. And I think that that's really helpful when we think about the things that we're worrying about. Is it ripe for worry yet? Or is this a moot issue? If it hasn't come to fruition yet and you need more information, like something else has to happen before it can be revealed whether or not something bad is going to come from whatever unfolds, then it's not ripe for worry yet. So spending a lot of mental energy thinking about, oh, I don't want that to happen. What if it happens? It's going to be so bad if it happens. It hasn't happened yet. So put a pin in it. You can schedule your worry for a later date and time when it's actually ripe for worry. And then same thing, vacillating on something that's moot. Like if it already happened and you can't change it, then there's really no point in thinking about it. If you can evaluate and learn from it, amazing, leverage the lesson out of whatever occurred. Or if there is something you can do about it now, go do that thing. But just vacillating and spinning about it, huge mental drain, no great ROI.
Mm. How does having, to constantly evaluate options and make judgment calls to start to wear down a lawyer's focus and energy over time?
Totally. So if you think about your brain like a battery on your cell phone, every decision that you require it to make, every time that it's processing information, it's taken some of the charge out of the battery, which is why we have the concept of decision fatigue. We make so many decisions, we eventually wear that battery out. But you can decide what makes sense for me to spend my mental capacity on and then what doesn't make sense for me to spend my mental capacity on. So I see this with overthinking a lot, and overthinking can manifest in different ways. But a big way overthinking comes up is you keep oscillating between the same options with no new information. Like if you've gathered the available information that's out there, and now it just comes time to make a decision, you might not love your options, so you're going to hesitate and keep circling back in between the ones that are available to you. But if you're not going to get more information at a later date and time, continuing to think about that is just draining your battery without leading to a better outcome. You don't need more time to think about it. You just need to be willing to gag and go through the discomfort of picking one of the available options that you don't love. Same thing with deciding what to do. So many of my people struggle with prioritizing the tasks that they have on their plate, and they will expend a lot of energy toggling back and forth, checking their list, thinking about, should I start on this, opening a document, going into their inbox, no, I should do this other thing instead. And you're spending all of this time redeciding this decision of what to work on over and over and over again without making any progress. So a really good rule of thumb to have for yourself is my goal is to spend the least amount of time deciding what to do and the most amount of time actually doing it. And if you audit your time and see where your time goes throughout the day, you can start to see, am I spending most of my time producing or am I spending most of my time thinking about what I need to produce? The latter is not where you want to be.
So, Miss Olivia, what are some ways lawyers overinvest that time and energy into things they don't actually require, that level of attention?
They will have a high, I really want to say perfect tier, a perfect standard or expectation of themselves across the board with all things, especially people who view their perfectionistic tendencies as a badge of honor or a flex. I used to be like this. I used to think that it was really admirable to be a perfectionist. But if you operate that way with all things, you will automatically be devoting time to getting something near perfect, because most things can't actually be done to a perfect standard, or we don't even have a definition for what that would look like and how we would define perfect in that instance. But they will invest time on things where there's really not that great of an ROI on that investment. There's like a diminishing return, so to speak, where yes, you could spend an extra 20 minutes on a 5-sentence email, but is it that much better than it was when you spent the first 5 minutes jotting down your thoughts and polishing it into 5 coherent sentences? Probably not. It's probably not the end of the world. Or, does the spreadsheet need to be color coded? Also, probably not. But people will invest time because they think everything needs to be flawless. And some things it matters more than others. And you really want to start to hone your ability to discern what instances it's important and what instances it's not.
What tends to happen before or at the start of the day that leaves someone already feeling depleted?
So a big one there is telling yourself that you were going to get more done before you actually start working. So this comes up for my perfectionists all the time, but they'll tell themselves, oh, I'll wake up early and do it. They were planning to do something in the evening, maybe before they left for home at the end of the day at work, or they said they'd log back on after the kids go to bed or after they eat dinner and knock that thing out, but then they're tired. So then they tell themselves the fib that, oh, I'll just wake up early and do it. And then they don't. They wake up at the time that they normally do, or they oversleep and now they're behind schedule and their day's already kind of gone off the rails. Or even if they didn't make themselves that promise, they will just have this perfectionistic standard of what a responsible person does, whether that's an employee, a business owner, whatever. They'll tell themselves, I need to wake up at 5 a.m. and I'm going to work from 5 to 8, and then I'll get ready and I'll drive to the office and I'll get to the office by 9, and I'll work until 7 p.m. and I'll get all of these things done. And if every day you typically wake up at 7:30 and not 5, but every day you tell yourself you're going to wake up at 5, every morning that you don't do the ambitious thing that clearly isn't aligned with your preferences, you're going to feel really discouraged and bad about yourself before the day's even started. So it's really important to align your plan with what you prefer and to take into account the data, the past data, what you tend to do in a given circumstance, because most people like to think about what's theoretically plausible if they were operating as their best, highest self, instead of taking a look at what past data would suggest is more likely to happen. When you plan off of that best case scenario and you're focused on setting a goal or a plan that's really ambitious because it's theoretically plausible, you typically set yourself up for failure.
So how does that ongoing mental exhaustion start to affect someone's focus, decision making, or maybe the interactions with other people?
Think about the emotion that you experience as weight. All right. So positive emotions are like light like a feather, and negative emotions are heavy, like sand, bags of sand. So the more negative emotion you're carrying around with you, the more weight you have to carry. And just like I was a cater waiter for one day to help a friend out years ago, then I had to walk around with like the hors d'oeuvre platter, serving hors d'oeuvres during the cocktail hour. And it was a small tray. It was rectangular. It was probably like this big, and just had, I don't know, maybe like 20 different things on it. And I was carrying it around like this all day, napkins. Would you like one? And it was light until an hour later. And by the end of the cocktail hour, like my arms were literally shaking. I'm like, I'm going to drop food on someone. This is not ideal. But it started to become unbearably heavy. And the same is true with all that negative emotion that we're carrying around with us. So it's so much harder. Think if you were trying to run a marathon, but someone keeps putting sand in your backpack, it's going to be harder for you to move forward and make that intentional progress. Negative emotion is no different. So when we're going through our days feeling frustrated with ourselves or discouraged or overwhelmed or resentful, any negative emotion that you can think of, we make it harder to take that positive, productive, intentional action. And eventually the weight just keeps compiling to the point where we can't move forward anymore. And that's really when we get into that burnout territory.
What tends to happen when someone keeps pushing through that drained feeling instead of addressing it?
Number one, you just feel like shit every day, which is, I tell my clients all the time, like feeling like shit feels like shit. So my goal for people is just to feel better. You deserve to feel better. You can feel better, but there are some skills that we teach through coaching of like how to manage your mind, how to challenge your thoughts so we can control your emotional experience that are vital in order to actually feeling better. But aside from just feeling badly day in and day out, our bodies, to go back to the cell phone analogy, whether it's a battery or whatnot, think about what happens when you put your cell phone in the heat. Maybe you're laying out by the pool and it's in the sun and it gets overheated. Eventually it shuts off. It gives you a little warning message and says, phone will start working again when it comes back to a safe temperature. And you can't do anything on it, no matter how hard you try. You're like trying to tap it and it just won't work. Our bodies do that. When you ignore what your body is trying to tell you for long enough, it's like, all right, lady, you are not listening to me. I'm going to power down now. I'm going to go into the safety mode so you don't do further damage. Enough is enough. And then it goes to sleep. So you become pretty unfunctioning over time. Again, same thing with like the weighted bag sand analogy is that eventually there will be so much weight on you that you just can't move forward. So everything gets harder as you're headed to that point, and eventually you'll reach it and just stop.
What are some ways lawyers can start protecting that energy during the day without cutting back their workload?
So the big thing here is to first start paying attention to how you feel. Actually name it. Most people just say they're uncomfortable or they're anxious. And those are really big umbrellas, and they don't really help us figure out the best way to move forward or the right solution for that situation. So if you can actually name, hey, I'm feeling really guilty, or I'm feeling very overwhelmed, or I'm feeling inadequate, like I'm not doing a good enough job. Once we get clear on what that emotional experience is, we can find the thoughts causing it and then figure out if there are changes we can make, whether it's changes to the way that we're thinking about a situation or changes to the things that you actually do. Sometimes, like inadequate, for example, we have to change your expectations. You might not even know what you're expecting of yourself. And our brains are kind of jerks, and they love to say, I don't know what a good enough job is, but this isn't it. What you're doing is not cutting it. And then you're constantly like trying to grab the thing that's outside of your reach. It's like being in the desert and making your way towards an oasis that's always off into the distance on the horizon. Feeling adequate will feel like that too if you don't define what the standard is, what the expectation is, and make sure that it's measurable, objective, not subjective, actually attainable, sustainable, specific enough to where you know, hey, I arrived. I'm where I'm supposed to be. This is what I was aiming for, and I got here. So checking in with yourself, and anyone who's listening to this is something that you can do right now. What do I expect of myself? Start to make a list, force yourself to write it down, answer as candidly and as sincerely as you possibly can, and you'll be surprised what your brain offers up to you. Sometimes, and actually I'll say oftentimes, it's very unrealistic, or it's wildly outside the realm of what's possible, and you will quickly see, no wonder I feel like I'm dropping the ball every day. There's no way I'd be able to reach that standard. So I need to adjust the standard, not just push myself or beat myself up to try and rise to meet it.
So if someone feels mentally drained all the time, what's that one thing they could start doing differently right away to begin getting their energy back, Olivia?
The one thing that people could do to get their energy back and protect their energy moving forward is just to figure out what they think during the given course of a day. Like I said earlier, that negative emotion, all those bags of sand that we're carrying around, if we can offload each one of the sandbags, we might not get to zero, but we can make the backpack a lot less heavy. The way to do that is to identify, what am I thinking that's causing this negative emotion? And if you can find it and ask yourself, what's a 10% better thought that I could think? What's a slightly less dramatic sentence I could think in place of this one? You don't have to go from it's the worst of times to it's the best of times. But if you could think a slightly better thought, we think 60,000 thoughts a day. So the compound effect of thinking slightly better thoughts all throughout your day eliminates so many of those bags of sand that you really start to lighten your load. And I think the big mistake that people make here is they assume they need to do something differently in order to feel better. And yes, there are changes that we can make, like the way you plan your day, or not being overly ambitious with when you start your day, or doing the math when it comes to planning. So you're not doing wish-based planning, you're actually factoring in the time you have available and how long it will take to do the things you need to do to make sure the maths. But people focus on the strategy and they ignore the thing that actually moves the dial the most, which is changing the way that you think, because your thoughts cause your feelings and your feelings drive all the action that you take. So you can get to the strategy later. You'll have a better time implementing it if your mind is primed. Start with just figuring out what you're currently thinking. Don't underestimate the power of that. And don't underestimate the power of thinking a slightly better thought. Do it enough times throughout the day, totally changes your experience.
Good stuff. Miss Olivia, thank you.
Thanks, Evan.
All right, that's it for today's episode of the Less Stressed Lawyer Show. If you're ready to stop overthinking and start making bold moves in your life and practice, visit oliviavizachero.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to like, subscribe to the show, and leave a review if you found this episode helpful. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.